Out of these names, is there one name, Cody, that you want more than anyone else?
Out of these names, out of these 5 guys they've already requested, I want DeMeco Ryans. I want DeMeco Ryans to be the next head coach of the Houston Texans. I want a mix of where the NFL is going and a harken back to the good days of Texans football. And there have been very few great days. There have been a bunch of good days. DeMeco was here through some of those good days. And DeMeco Ryans is the type of guy that I feel like would connect well with these players that are already on the staff. He would coach them hard. And I also get the sense that DeMeco Ryans is not beholden to any sort of relationship or I have to bring this guy or I have to do this way. I feel like DeMeco Ryans is the type of guy that would have some input from everybody else in the organization and then be the final decision maker on how they put some things together. There's a bunch of different ways DeMeco Ryans could go with the offensive coordinator spot because who these defensive guys would bring in to run the offense is the most important question they have to answer. Like, who the defensive guys are going to have run the offense is the most important question I have for the defensive guys. For the offensive guys, it's what's the plan at offense. Do you have to have Bryce Young? Do you have to have C.J. Stroud? Do we have to go get one of these veteran quarterbacks who's leaving their team for you? But for these defensive guys, who is it bringing in? I don't think it's out of the question that DeMeco Ryans would hire somebody that he doesn't have a previous relationship with and just kind of let that guy handle the offense while DeMeco helps out on the defense and is kind of that walk-around coach. Or, hell, maybe DeMeco wants to call the defense from the headset. I'm fine with whatever he wants to do. But you talk about a unifying opportunity for this organization, this fan base, and, oh, by the way, one of the best coaches in football from the defensive side of the football. DeMeco Ryans is it for me. He's my number one.
I feel like that is the universal guy that this fan base would, no matter what else they do, like, they got it right, a head coach, if you bring in DeMeco. Now, there's other names here that I think would excite the fan base, but BK, I think DeMeco Ryans would be the name by far that would get this fan base the most pumped up and the most buy back in amongst Texas fans.
He'd get Texans fans excited, but I don't know if he's the top choice for every Texans fan out there. He's not the top choice for me. I want an offensive guy. Like, DeMeco Ryans has done a tremendous job with that Niners defense. They're number one in the NFL in scoring defense. They're number one in total defense. That's a legit Super Bowl contender in large part because of how good DeMeco Ryans' defense has been, and he's been there for more than 1 year, which I really like. I get a little bit worried, like Ben Johnson, we might talk about him here in a second, or Edro Evero, like 2 of the other guys who are on this list for the Texans coaching candidates. They've only been coordinators for 1 year. Like, I'd prefer multiple years just so I know it's not a 1-year fluke type of thing. And with DeMeco Ryans, I think it's clear as day that it's not a fluke. Like, the dude knows how to coach ball. He knows how to coach defense. But there are going to be some people, and myself included, who would prefer an offensive-minded head coach. If the plan is, and the plan should be, to draft a quarterback with that number 2 overall pick, I want the best possible mind developing that quarterback. I'm sure DeMeco Ryans would do a good job bringing in an offensive coordinator, but it's no secret. You can't get as good of an offensive mind if you're asking him to be your coordinator than you could if you're asking him to be your head coach, right? Like, very few people in this league would take a lateral move. You're not going to get one of the best offensive coordinators who has a chance to be a head coach at some point very soon to take your job as an offensive coordinator. Now, that guy's going to want to be a head coach. So I think you guys are right. I think DeMeco Ryans, like, I'd be fine with the hire. I'd be happy with the hire. And he'd obviously rejuvenate this fan base to a large degree, but I don't know if everybody, and myself included, would have him as my top choice because he just coaches defense.
Who's your top guy?
I think it's Shane Steichen right now.
Okay.
And he's been in the mix for a while for me. What he's done with that Eagles offense over the last couple of seasons. And Jalen Hurts was the MVP frontrunner before he went down with an injury a couple of weeks ago. They're top 3 in scoring offense. They're top 3 in total offense as well. He was also the offensive coordinator for the Chargers during Justin Herbert's rookie year, in which he won Rookie of the Year and burst onto the scene and was incredibly successful there. Like, this guy's 3 years as being a really, really good coordinator in 2 different spots. Nick Sirianni's done a phenomenal job as a head coach. I think that's a good head coach to learn under as well. And it's clear, like I think Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud have more arm talent than Jalen Hurts does. Once again, look at the job he's done with Jalen Hurts. So I think Shane Steichen would be my top guy right now for the Texans, and I'm glad he's at least on the list.
I'd prefer an offensive-minded guy, but hire the best coach. And I think the best guy on this list is DeMeco Ryans. And that's based on his playing experience, based on what he's done the last couple of years since he replaced Robert Saleh as the Niners defensive coordinator, the coaches he learned under, I think is a big factor in all this. So I'd be great with DeMeco Ryans. I'd love that if I were a Texan fan. If it's not Ryans, though, out of the choices they've spoken to so far, I think Steichen makes a ton of sense, and I think Ben Johnson obviously makes a lot of sense for the reasons you guys outlined. I don't really understand the Jonathan Gannon thing. And talking to people that cover Gannon and people in Philadelphia, like Eagles fans, they don't seem to understand why he's generating so much buzz either. And my big thing with Gannon would be this. You could have hired this guy last year. And we could have avoided this whole Lovie Smith debacle if you just hired Jonathan Gannon a year ago. So now you're going to speak to him a year later? Like, what changed? What's the difference? So that'd be an odd hire to me when you could have had the guy a year ago.
You know the difference, Jake. There was no Brian Flores lawsuit this year. There was one last year.
Well, I think it was because they were trying to force Jonathan Gannon to pick his staff, if you believe the reporting that was out there. So now all of a sudden they're going to let him hire his own staff. I'd be a little weary of bringing in a guy that you spoke to last year and could have hired him. Yeah. I don't think it was the Flores lawsuit. I think it was the McCown factor and all this.
They were going to hire McCown first.
Well, but I think they were going to try and force feed McCown to Gannon, and that was part of the reporting that was out there. That Gannon was like, I want to pick my own staff if I'm going to be a head coach.
So there's your answer. That's what changed from last year to this year, right? Like if the Texans are serious about getting Jonathan Gannon, who is more than likely going to be a head coach next year, and that guy got multiple interviews last year. It wasn't just a random Texans reach a season ago. He got multiple interviews across the league last year, and the Eagles' defense is number 2 in the NFL. He's going to get multiple interviews again this season, and he'll probably get an offer or two when it's all said and done. So it's different than last year. Look, I get it. If he's not your top guy, he's not my top guy either. So I don't disagree with you on that front, but
he's also a defensive guy. I'd prefer the offensive
Bingo.
guy.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. It's different from last year though. This whole coaching search is different from the last 2 years, and that's why the Texans should be able to actually land, not just interview, but actually land one of the top guys that other teams are coveting as well.
The offensive guys certainly have a leg up because the concern you're going to have from the long term as you start to think about how this defensive guy has success is eventually, if your offense is working, if your offensive mind is really good, they're going to go out of your building, they're going to leave, and you're going to have a new offensive mind come in. And that's something that you have to consider when you add a defensive guy. That offensive guy they bring in is not always going to be their offensive guy. He's either going to be good enough to give somebody else a chance, or he's going to be good enough to go be a head coach somewhere, or he's not going to be good enough, you're going to have to hire somebody else. It's like, but your offensive guy is, your top offensive mind in the building is going to change over. Okay? If you hire an offensive guy, the top offensive mind in the building is always the head coach.
Yeah, that's true. I'd prefer the guy to get hired away because that means he's doing a good job versus him getting fired. But you're right. I mean, it's more likely to happen if you hire a defensive guy is that you lose your offensive guy, and then your young quarterback has to learn a new offense early in his career.
Well, and you think about the QB2, and this comment from Joe Burrow yesterday was incredible. They asked him about what's the window here the Bengals have. Joe Burrow's comment was, the window's open as long as I'm here. Like that's what you hope the offense is, that you build it good enough that everybody and their mom's dying to coordinate it because it's such a good offense. Well, hopefully if a defensive guy is the head coach, he brings in an offensive mind that can put it at that level.